And then the last one is discussions. This is kind of new. I'm piloting this. This is more or less a COVID test because we can't meet in real life. I've basically taken weight away from the midterms and the finals, applied them to these discussion questions. And what this is I'm going to give you a few prompts. Some of them are going to be in response to those podcasts that I had mentioned earlier in the syllabus. And these prompts are going to be like, so there's a black unemployment gap. Describe your experience with that if you have any. Describe ways to alleviate that. What can policymakers do? Is there some sort of economic logic that defines that? So, for instance, you might say that systemic bias at, let's say, I'm not sure if you're familiar with redlining, or better example. Redlining and bank access are kind of related examples, but if you want to say like an economic logic behind a black unemployment gap is that black entrepreneurs actually have lower access to banks because there are less black-owned banks. That's got knock-on effects. So if you can't access financing, you can't invest in yourself. If you can't invest in yourself, you can't be productive, or not that you can't be productive, but you can't be as productive as you would be in the long run. And if there's no black entrepreneurs, they can't hire black workers. So there's higher black unemployment. It doesn't necessarily have to be, interpersonal racism. It could be, systemic racism that's kind of carried on. So with redlining, which is like this policy where lenders weren't allowed to, and kind of on their own didn't. It's kind of top down. It really did come from the government, and I think it started in the FDR administration, but I'm not 1,000% sure on that. So if I'm wrong on that, feel free to call me out on that. I'm not positive on that, but basically it was a top-down initiative where in certain neighborhoods, blacks wouldn't have access to mortgages. What did that do? That, one, it shut out black people to only low-income neighborhoods, and two, it pushed them together so that these low-income neighborhoods were kind of crime-ridden. Like, that's going to have knock-on effects. And then you add to that lack of access to capital because of no black-owned businesses and no black-owned banks. That's going to have additional rollover effects. All this is to say, like, you can have a kind of discussion like what I just said. Like, these are kind of like historical things that are happening with this particular topic. Another one could be, so I have them listed in the back end here in the course schedule. So in this little column here, so the first one is racial disparity in economics. So I'm going to have a few sub-prompts, but one of them is going to be why only 2.5% of PhD students are black right now, versus 13% of the black population, give or take. That's massively underrepresented. And, you can talk about the things that I just talked about, but I don't want you parroting my opinions. And you can disagree. You're allowed to have opposite opinions. Just have a discussion where you cite your facts, and you treat everybody with respect. And that's not a shouting match. This is not Twitter. Nobody is getting slam dunked on. This is a discussion thread. Civility will reign. If you're not being civil, that's how you lose points on this. That's how I report you if you're using, hateful speech, or if you're talking to someone who's ideologically opposed to you like they're an idiot. So, I just cited the minimum wage as, having potential knock-on effects for business. If you're working minimum wage, that's fine. You can disagree with me. Or, if you're not working minimum wage, that's fine too. You can disagree with me. It's a hot topic in economics. It's something that, there's a million papers produced on every year, and, they go both ways, and that's fine. Discussion and disagreement are natural. And I will, not just but I think everybody, as a motivating factor, should listen to the people who disagree with them more than they listen to the people who agree with them, because that's how you get, this political environment that we're at, where everybody just kind of shouting past each other. And I hate that. So, I think that's every assignment. So 6 quantitative assignments, drop your lowest 2. 2 midterms and a final, take home with 72 hours to complete. They're going to be posted on Mondays. Then they'll be due on the Thursdays at 11:59 p.m. Textbook assignments due typically on the Mondays, except for where noted. Your journals. So the timing on the journals, they're all going to be due 12/7, but depending on how they line up with the particular classes, like the particular lecture notes, I'm not going to release the journals until the given week, because you're not going to be able to do them in an intelligible fashion. So like the prisoner's dilemma one, if I just gave that to you today and you're like, oh, these are what's happening, it's not going to make sense, because you have to understand what an economic model is before you can do the prisoner's dilemma question. If I give you the minimum wage one, I want you to understand price controls, because minimum wage is a type of price control. And I want you to understand the graphical logic behind that before you can really intelligibly say something about that. Discussion threads, basically you're going to have 2 weeks to do them. I think in every case, you can see when they close here. So just, take your discussion thread. And I'm going to kind of keep them up only for 2 weeks. So if you don't get to them, that's fine. You're going to pick any 3. But, you have 2 weeks to do them, at which point the next discussion thread will be posted. And they're going to be related to, particular topics more or less. The racial disparity one, the COVID one, less so. I just kind of want you to talk about racial disparity as it applies to you. I want you to talk about COVID as it applies to you. Scarcity will have to do with, and immigration kind of have to do with supply and demand. So, I'll keep them up for 2 weeks. If you don't get to them in that 2 weeks, there will be other ones. But, if you don't get to here, like if you miss the first 2, you got to do the last 3. It's just kind of how it works, right? So probably better to front load them if you can. Also, I think the racial disparity one is probably going to be the most interesting one for a lot of you. But if you're like, I hate that this is even being asked, you can skip it. I hope that nobody's like that, but I do want to tolerate other opinions, so yeah. So yeah, just get to 3 discussion threads, 2 journals. Like I said, the journals will stay up until 12/7. They'll all be due at once, but you don't have to do them. You won't have access to them all until the particular lecture notes are up. And then there's going to be extra credit. Like I said, the algebra review is going to be mandatory. It's still going to be 2%, so do it. It'll be mandatory, 2%. A smart person might say, what's the punishment that if you don't do that? Nothing. I can't enforce extra credit. The punishment will be that you're going to flounder through the rest of the course if you don't know how to do the algebra. So do it. There's nothing else to do this week besides Chapter 1. So do it. But I can't penalize you for not doing it. It's mandatory. Sorry, quote bubble is mandatory. But do it. Just do it. Just do it. I don't know how else to say it. Just do it. If you're so confident in your algebra that you don't have to do it, fine. But if you aren't, this is where understand that you're not. So just do it. I don't know how else I can say it. Do you want me to put up the Nike logo or something? Anyway, then there's this Commanding Heights documentary. Each one's an hour and a half. And then there's like a short questionnaire. I would expect you to do the questionnaire as you're watching the assignment, because it's like the 5-minute mark, this question is going to come up. 10-minute mark, this question is going to come up. The first one's up. I can even put that up now, if you so choose. If you want, people are asking me to put it up. Like, it's ready to go. I haven't come up with the questionnaires for numbers 2 and 3. Trade review is ready to go, but you won't be able to do it until this lecture. Until this lecture. But I want you to have done the assignment and have considered the assignment before I give the extra credit. So this is the other Commanding Heights. The last one is elections and oligopolies. So this one is going to be due 11/2, which is right before the election. And this is an extra credit assignment that I just kind of think is cool. If you don't want to do it, no harm on you. Basically, what I'm going to be testing on is, or what this extra credit is going to be testing on is, I'm going to have a voter model, and it's going to be like what's called the central limit theorem. And this is kind of basically, it's like if you have voters on an axis from super liberal to super conservative, and the camera's flipped for me, so I should say super liberal, this is your left here, and super conservative, your right here. That's kind of hard to get used to. So like if you have voters lined up on an axis from left to right, and you have a primary system or no primary system, how does that change the positioning of the candidates and how they would, in a really competitive election, want to position their platform? It's just a little kind of cool thing that you kind of do in more economics 3 and economics 4, but I'm going to kind of simplify it so that you can kind of do it here, and it'll be another 2% for your extra credit grade. And it shouldn't be too hard. Haven't written it, but want to kind of show you guys, how elections should run out. At any rate, I want to cut off the discussion section there. There'll be a second half of this video. The lecture slides are going to be roughly about 90 minutes piece. So that would be what your in-class sessions are. So I'm going to try to cut them up into shorter sections so that I can kind of make them more digestible. But 90 minutes of lectures. 3 hours of lectures. I'm probably going to cut them up into a slide at a time or something. But I'll even find slices within this lecture so that I can make it a little bit shorter. So expect every week to get about 3 hours of lecture. Probably about, with your reading, I would say it should be about an hour reading. It should only be like 30 pages. 20 minutes on the textbook assignments. And then I would say about 2 to 3 hours on the quantitative assignments, with an upper bound of maybe 5 hours if you're really struggling and if you procrastinated and didn't have the time to ask me questions. Journals could be done in about 2 hours. Discussion posts should be about 30 minutes, extra credit. The Commanding Heights is going to take an hour and a half to watch. The algebra review should be 30 minutes if you're good at algebra. Maybe an hour if you're not. This should be about an hour or 2 hours. And yeah. So, budget your time accordingly. So like on this week, hour reading, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, plus a 3-hour lecture. So about 6 hours, if I did that right, 30. So hour, 30. So that's 4.5 hours plus the lecture. and then 35 hours. So 6 to 7 hours, depending on how long it takes you to do the algebra. And then, quantitative assignment weeks expect a little bit more. Some of you guys are working. I understand that, but, so am I. I do put in about 10 to 15 hours a week on this course in terms of grading and coming up with the assignments and preparing the lectures. I expect not that you are going to do 6 to 10 hours, but maybe about 6 to 8 hours a week, I think is a fair time constraint. And, it might be smoother for some of you, it might be harder for others. And if it's harder, just let me know. And I'll do my best to answer your questions in a reasonable fashion. Anyway, I'm going to cut this syllabus section off, and then I'm going to go into what is economics, and that'll be the end of the first lecture. Okay. And how do I stop this? Sorry, y'all. This is my first time using this recording software. Where is the mouse?